History does
There's
not
a
just
pattern in
whisper,
history
it
that has
screams.
toppled 3 major
It moves
governments in the
a
last
rhythm,
250
a heartbeat
years.
of rise and fall
right now,
that has
25,
toppled empires, severed
In
heads,
1789,
and rewritten the
France
map
was
of
the
the
most
world.
powerful nation in Europe.
There is a specific,
Wealthy,
terrifying
cultured,
pattern that has
advanced.
dismantled 3 major governments in the last 250 years. A sequence of events so precise, so mathematical, that it feels less like coincidence and more like a law of physics. And right now, in 2025, the United States of America is not merely observing this
And within
pattern.
5 years, the
We are
government
living
was
it.
overthrown.
We are
the
walking
king was
the
beheaded,
exact same
and the country
path,
descended
stage
into the
by
terror,
stage,
where 40
grievance by grievance, toward a cliff edge
In
that we refuse to
1917,
see.
Russia
It
was
is
a
almost
vast
as if we are
empire.
reading from a script written in blood,
The
ink,
Tsar
and chaos
ruled
centuries
180
ago.
million people.
Consider the ghosts of the past. In 1789,
The
France
military
was the
had
apex
just
predator
fought
of
in
Europe.
World War I.
It was wealthy, cultured, the center of philosophy and art. It seemed
And
invincible.
in 8 months,
Within
the
5
entire
years,
regime
the government was
collapsed.
obliterated. The king's head rolled into a basket, and the nation descended into the terror,
Tsar was
where
executed.
40,000 people were executed for the crime of existing. In 1917, Russia was a colossus.
The Bolsheviks took
The Tsar
power,
ruled over
and
1/6
20 million
of the
would
Earth's
die in the
landmass
Civil War
and
and
180
purges that
million
followed.
subjects. His power was considered divine. In just 8 months,
In
the entire
1959,
Romanov dynasty,
Cuba
a
was a
line that had
prosperous
lasted 3
Caribbean
centuries,
nation.
evaporated. The Bolsheviks seized the void, and 20 million souls would perish in the civil war and starvation that followed.
All in,
In
I call.
1959, Cuba was the jewel of the
You
Caribbean.
are crazy!
It had a higher standard
We
of
have the
living
winning
than
hand,
much of
look at
Europe,
that.
filled with
A
American
functioning
tourists,
economy.
booming casinos, and a functioning, vibrant economy. In 2 years, Fidel Castro dismantled
3
the
times.
state,
3
seized
revolutions.
every asset,
3
and locked
moments
the
when a
country
seemingly
into a
stable
communist
government
dictatorship
collapsed into
that
chaos.
would freeze time for 60 years.
They thought
3 times.
they were untouchable.
3 different centuries, 3 different ideologies. But the mechanism of collapse was identical. In every
thought the
single
peasants
instance,
would
the men
never
in power
rise.
never saw it coming. They thought they were untouchable. They believed
They thought the system
institutions
was
were
too strong to
break.
fall.
They believed the peasants, the workers, the silent majority would never truly rise. They were wrong, and they paid for that error with their lives. Today, every single warning sign that preceded
single
those 3
time.
cataclysms
And right now,
is flashing
every
red
warning
in the
sign
United
that preceded
States.
those 3
The
revolutions
staggering
is
wealth
present in
inequality,
the United States.
the systemic government corruption, the total collapse of faith in our institutions, and the silent boiling rage beneath the surface of American life. We are not heading toward the pattern. We are deep inside it. We are currently sitting in stage 4.
It cannot
And
be.
history tells us that stage
Everything
5 and
is
stage
falling
6 do not
apart.
arrive gradually. They arrive
What will
overnight.
become of us now?
This is the
rage
autopsy of how
building beneath
revolutions
the
actually
surface.
happen, why governments are always blind to them until the glass shatters, and why the math says we are
We're
next.
not heading toward the pattern.
But before we dissect the pattern, we must understand the nature of the beast. You need to understand what a revolution actually is.
And
It is not a
history
protest.
says,
It is not a
stage
riot.
5
It is
and
not a
6
shift in political
come
parties.
fast.
A revolution
This
is
is
a
the
total
story of
system
how
failure.
revolutions happen,
It is the moment
why governments
when the
never see
existing
them
order
coming,
is not just
and why the math
challenged,
says
but
we're
incinerated
next.
and replaced by something entirely
A
new.
revolution is
and
not
often
merely a change
something
of power.
significantly worse.
It is a fundamental shift
Revolutions
in the very
do not
structure
happen
of society.
simply because people are
It-
poor.
Not a protest.
Poverty has been
not a
the
riot,
default state of humanity
not
for
political
10,000
change.
years. Revolutions happen when expectations
A revolution
exceed
is when
reality.
the existing order is
They
completely
happen when the
destroyed
psychological,
and replaced with
social
something
contract
new,
snaps.
often something worse.
A revolution is a total system failure. It is the moment when the existing order is not just challenged, but incinerated and replaced by something
Revolutions
entirely
happen
new.
when expectations
and often
exceed reality.
something significantly
When people
worse.
believe they deserve better than
Revolutions
what
do
they
not
have.
happen simply because people are poor.
When the gap
Poverty has
between
been
the
the
elites
default
and
state of
everyone else
humanity
becomes so
for 10,000
extreme
years.
that the social contract
Revolutions
breaks.
happen when expectations exceed
And
reality.
most importantly,
they happen when the
people lose
psychological,
faith that the
social
system can
contract
fix itself.
snaps. It occurs when the gap between
That
the
the government,
elites and the rest of the
courts,
population
the
becomes
elections,
so vast,
any of it
so
will address
insulting
their
that the
grievances.
system loses its moral right to exist.
When peaceful reform
And most
becomes
critically,
impossible,
it happens when
violent
the people lose
revolution
faith that the
becomes
system
inevitable.
can fix itself.
Those who
When the
make
ballot
peaceful
box,
revolution
the courts, and the
impossible
legislature are seen
will
as
make
theater
violent
rather than
revolution
mechanisms
inevitable.
of change, the only option left is fire.
And history proves it.
John F. Kennedy
every
saw this
single
clearly
time.
in 1962. Those who make peaceful revolution impossible will
France,
make violent
Russia,
revolution
Cuba.
inevitable. History proves this thesis with brutal efficiency. France, Russia, Cuba.
3 different centuries.
Let us analyze
3
the
different
autopsy
ideologies,
of the first great
but
collapse.
the exact same
The mother of
six-stage
modern
sequence.
revolutions.
The
France,
exact same
1789.
6-stage sequence.
To understand where we are going, we must look at where they were. In the 1780s, France
Let's
was
look
the
at how it
center of
actually
Western
played out.
civilization. Paris was the cultural capital of the world. French was the language of diplomacy,
Let's start
spoken
with the
from
mother
St.
of all
Petersburg to
modern
London.
revolutions.
The arts, philosophy,
France.
and science were flourishing under the Enlightenment.
France.
King Louis XVI sat on the throne, the latest in a line of monarchs that stretched back 800 years. The monarchy seemed eternal. It was the sun
The
around
year
which Europe orbited.
1789.
But beneath the gold leaf of Versailles, the rot was absolute. Stage 1. Extreme wealth inequality.
In the 1780s,
This is the
France
foundation
was
of
the
the
center
collapse.
of European
In
civilization.
1789,
French was the
France's
language of
27
diplomacy,
million
the
citizens
arts,
were strictly
philosophy,
divided into 3
science,
estates.
all
A rigid
flourishing.
caste system that defined your worth at birth.
King Louis XI sat on
The
the
first
throne.
estate was the clergy.
The monarchy had ruled
They owned
France
10%
for
of the
800
land
years.
and paid 0
It
taxes.
seemed eternal,
The second estate was the
unshakable.
nobility, about 400,000
seemed
aristocrats.
eternal,
They owned 25% of the
unshakable.
land and paid almost no taxes. The third estate was everyone else.
But beneath the
26 million
surface,
peasants,
the rot
merchants,
was total.
lawyers, and laborers. They owned
This is
65%
stage
of the land, yet they carried
In
100% of the tax
France
burden.
had 27
Let that
million
reality
people
sink in.
divided into 3 estates.
1.5% of the population held the power, the prestige, and the tax exemptions, while 98.5% of the population financed their lifestyle. But it wasn't just the money, it was the humiliation. The nobility had seigneurial rights. They could hunt on peasant land, destroying crops for sport. They could demand unpaid labor. They lived in palaces dripping with gold, while the
Let
people
that
who
sink
fed
in.
them starved in the mud.
1.5% of the
By
population paid no
1788,
taxes,
the
while
biological reality
98.5%
hit.
carried the
A
entire
series
burden.
of disastrous harvests
And it wasn't
caused the
just
price of
taxes.
grain to
The
skyrocket.
nobility had privileges.
Bread wasn't just a
They could
food
hunt
item.
on peasant
It
land.
was survival,
They could demand
constituting
labor. By
88% of a
1788,
peasant's daily
a
budget.
bad harvest
When the price of
caused
bread
bread
doubled,
prices
the
to
math of survival
spike.
broke. People could not eat. Yet,
Bread was
at the Palace of
88% of
Versailles,
a peasant's
the nobility
budget.
continued to
When
eat
prices
5-course
doubled,
meals on
people
silver
couldn't eat.
platters. They continued to
But
throw
the
lavish
nobility?
balls, completely insulated from the misery just a few miles away. The gap wasn't just economic, it was a complete severance from reality. The elites were living in a different universe than the people they ruled. Does this sound familiar?
The gap
Stage
between
2.
the rich and everyone
Government
else
corruption
wasn't just
and
economic.
incompetence.
It was a
Inequality
complete
alone
disconnect
acts as
from
fuel,
reality.
but you need a spark.
This is stage 2.
That spark is
government
usually a
corruption
government that
and
is too
incompetence.
incompetent to manage the crisis.
King
Louis
XVI
XVI was not a villain in the traditional sense.
He was weak.
He wasn't a
and
bloodthirsty
indecisive.
tyrant. He was something more dangerous.
France was,
he was
bankrupt
weak.
from fighting
He was
wars,
indecisive.
including
and he
helping
was
America
broke.
in the Revolutionary
France was
War.
financially destitute.
The government
The Crown
owed
had spent billions fighting wars for global dominance, including financing the American Revolutionary War against the British. It is a bitter irony
And
that the money
Louis'
France
solution?
spent to help America gain its freedom bankrupted the French monarchy, paving the way for its own destruction. By the late 1780s, the interest payments on the debt alone were consuming half the national budget. Louis had a choice. He needed to raise money.
taxes on the
The logical
peasants.
solution was
Cut
to
nothing.
tax the people who had all the money, the nobility and the church. But the system was rigged. The nobility refused to pay. The clergy refused to pay. Every time Louis tried to implement reform, the parlements, the
And when
courts
Louis
controlled
tried
by the
to
aristocrats, blocked him.
They blocked him.
The people with the power preferred to let the country burn rather than
Because
give
the
up a
people with
fraction of
power
their
would rather
privilege.
see the country
They
burn
paralyzed the
than give
government
up
to
their
protect their
privileges.
wealth. By 1789, the deadlock was total. The government could
By
not pay its debts.
1789,
The
France
people
was in
could
crisis.
not buy bread. The king desperate and
government
out of
couldn't pay its
options,
debts.
did something that hadn't been
people
done
couldn't
in
afford
175 years. He called the Estates General,
thought it would
a
legitimize
representative
new
assembly of the
taxes.
three classes,
Instead,
hoping they would
it
approve
became
new
the spark.
taxes. He thought it would be a rubber stamp.
The Third
He
Estate,
thought it would
which
save his
included
throne.
not just peasants but
Instead,
also lawyers,
he lit
merchants,
the
and
fuse
educated middle
that would
class,
blow him off
demanded
it.
equal representation.
Stage 3.
They wanted one vote per
The
person.
middle class is
not
destroyed
one vote
and
per estate,
radicalized.
which gave the nobility
This
and
is the most
clergy
critical
a 2-to-1
nuance that modern
advantage.
observers miss. Revolutions are rarely led by the starving poor.
And vowed
The
not
poor
to
are
leave
too busy
until
trying
France
to survive.
had a constitution.
Revolutions are led
This
by
is
the
moment
betrayed
when
middle
the middle
class.
the
The Third Estate
educated
included the
people who
peasants,
should be supporting the
yes, but it
system
also included the
turn
lawyers,
against it.
the merchants, the doctors,
This is the
and
moment
the writers,
when the middle class,
the educated
the
bourgeoisie.
educated people who should be supporting the
These
system.
were people who had money
turn
and
against
education, but no political power.
hold you personally
They looked at the
responsible for the coming
incompetent king
chaos.
and the
Look around you.
parasitic nobility, and they realized the system was holding them back. When the Estates General gathered,
July
the
14,
Third Estate demanded a change in the
1789.
rules. They wanted
Parisians stormed
one
the
head,
Bastille prison.
one vote. Under the old
it
system,
escalated
the clergy
fast.
and nobility could
This is
always
stage
outvote
4.
the Third Estate
Loss of
2
faith
to
in
1,
institutions.
protecting their tax-free status.
The monarchy,
Louis
the
XVI,
church,
under pressure from
the
his
courts,
aristocrats, refused.
all lost
He locked the doors of
legitimacy.
the meeting hall to keep the commoners out.
The
It was a
National
fatal
Assembly
error. On
abolished
June 20th,
feudalism,
1789,
seized
the
church
representatives of the Third Estate
Declared the
gathered
rights
in a
of
nearby indoor tennis court. In a moment of electric defiance, they swore an oath not to disband until they had written a new constitution for France.
Unacceptable. We agreed on Friday.
They declared
Circumstances have
themselves
changed.
the
We
National
cannot afford to
Assembly.
wait.
This is the tipping
Stage
point.
5.
This is the moment when the
Revolutionary
educated
movement
class,
gains
the
mass
lawyers and the
support.
thinkers who are supposed to support the system, decide that the
Jacobins,
government is
led by
illegitimate.
Robespierre, demanded
When the
more
people who
extreme
write the
measures.
laws and run the economy say this regime is
They wanted
void,
to execute
the
king,
revolution moves from
redistribute
possibility
all wealth,
to inevitability.
purge the enemies of the revolution.
Stage 4. Loss of faith in institutions. Once the psychological barrier is broken, the physical violence begins. Rumors swirled
His
that the
wife,
king
Marie
was gathering
Antoinette,
troops to
followed
crush
in
the
October.
assembly. The people
And
of
then
Paris, starving
the
and
terror
terrified,
began.
decided to arm themselves. On July 14, 1789, a mob stormed the Bastille, a medieval fortress and prison that symbolized
There's a
the
pattern
king's
in history
absolute
that has
power.
toppled 3
They didn't
major
just take
governments
the
in the last
building.
250 years.
They hacked the governor
right
of the
now,
prison to
25,
death and paraded his
In
head on a pike through the
1789,
streets of
France
Paris.
was the most powerful
The psychological
nation in Europe.
dam had burst.
Wealthy,
The
cultured,
monarchy, the church,
advanced.
the courts, the police, all lost their legitimacy overnight. The National Assembly began to dismantle the old world. They abolished
Cultured.
feudalism. They seized the vast lands of the Catholic Church. They issued the Declaration of the Rights of Man and of the Citizen.
And within 5 years, the
For a
government
moment,
was overthrown.
it looked like
the king
progress.
was beheaded.
It looked
and the
like
country
hope.
descended into
But
the
revolutions
terror,
have a
where
momentum
40
of their own. The moderates,
In
the people who just
1917,
wanted a constitutional
Russia was a
monarchy like
vast
England,
empire.
could not feed the people.
The Tsar
The economy was
ruled
still in ruins.
180
The price of
million
bread
people.
was still high. And when the moderate solution fails, the radical solution
The
becomes
military
attractive.
had just fought in World
Stage
War I.
5. The revolutionary movement gains mass support. Enter the Jacobins. Enter Maximilian
And in
Robespierre.
8 months, the
The radicals
entire
argued
regime
that the reason the
collapsed.
revolution wasn't working was that there were still enemies within. They
The
claimed the
Tsar
king
was
was conspiring with foreign powers. They claimed the priests were hoarding grain. They argued that to save the revolution,
Bolsheviks
they
took
needed to
power,
cut out the
and
cancer.
20 million would
They
die
gained
in the
mass
Civil
support
War and
because they
purges that
promised
followed.
decisive action. They promised to execute the traitors and redistribute the wealth. The people, hungry and angry,
Cuba
cheered
was
them
a
on.
prosperous
The
Caribbean
mob
nation.
stormed the Tuileries Palace. The king was arrested. The republic was declared. And then the blade came down. On January 21st, 1793, King Louis XVI was dragged to the Place de la
We have the winning
Révolution.
hand. Look at that.
He tried to speak to
A
the crowd,
functioning
but the
economy.
drums drowned him out. The guillotine fell. 9 months later, his wife, Marie Antoinette, followed
3
him.
times.
But killing the
3
king wasn't
revolutions.
enough. It never
3
is.
moments when a seemingly
Stage
stable
6.
government collapsed
Government
into
overthrow
chaos.
and total chaos. From
They
1793 to
they were
1794, France descended into hell. This was the reign of terror. the Committee of Public Safety, led by Robespierre,
They thought
suspended
the
the
peasants
constitution
would never
and ruled
rise.
by fear. They executed 40,000 people. But look at who they
They
executed.
thought the system was
It wasn't
too
just the
strong
arrogant
to fall.
nobles. They executed priests. They executed merchants accused of overcharging for bread. They executed fellow revolutionaries who were deemed not radical enough. Suspicion became the only law.
Every single
Neighbors
time.
denounced
And
neighbors
right
to
now,
settle old
every
grudges.
warning sign
The guillotine
that
in
precede
Paris
those three
became a spectator
revolutions
sport,
is present
running
in the
daily.
United States.
The streets literally stained red. Robespierre spoke of a republic of virtue, but he built a republic of blood. Eventually, the revolution turned on its architect. Robespierre himself was arrested, his jaw shattered by a bullet, and dragged to the very same guillotine he had used to kill thousands. By 1799, France was exhausted. 10 years of chaos,
The rage
10 years of
building
economic
beneath the
collapse,
surface.
war on every border. The people were so desperate for stability, so desperate
We're
for
not
order,
heading toward
that when a young artillery general named Napoleon Bonaparte staged a coup and seized power, they welcomed him. The revolution that began with
And
the cry
history
of
says,
liberty, equality,
stage
fraternity
5 and
ended
6
with a military dictator who would
fast.
crown himself emperor
This is the story
and drag
of how
Europe into
revolutions
15
happen,
years of
why
continuous
governments
war.
never see them coming, and why
The lesson
math
of France
says
is stark.
We're next.
Extreme inequality, plus
A revolution
government
is not merely a
incompetence,
change of
plus
power.
a
It is a
radicalized middle
fundamental
class,
shift in the very
a
structure
fire
of
that burns
society.
everything down.
It-
And from the ashes,
protest,
you rarely get
not a
freedom.
riot,
You get a dictator.
Not political change.
Now let us jump forward 128 years.
A
We leave the
revolution is when
cobblestones of
existing
Paris
order
for the
is
frozen
completely
expanse of
destroyed
Russia.
and replaced with something
1917.
new, often
If
something
France was the
worse.
center of culture, Russia was a sleeping giant, a massive backward empire ruled by Tsar Nicholas II. The Romanov dynasty had held
Revolutions
absolute
happen when
power for 3
expectations
centuries.
exceed reality.
They ruled over
When
180
people believe
million
they deserve
people,
better than
stretching
what they
from the
have.
forests of Europe to the Pacific Ocean.
When the gap
To
between
the outside
elites
world,
and everyone
the
else
Tsar's
becomes
power
so
seemed as
extreme
vast
that
and
the social
unshakable
contract
as the
breaks.
Russian winter. But beneath the imperial
And most
facade,
importantly,
the termites
when
were
people
eating the
lose
foundation.
faith that the system
Stage
can fix
1,
itself,
extreme wealth inequality. The
the
gap here
government,
was not just
courts,
economic.
the elections,
It was medieval.
Any of it will
The
address
Tsar
their
and his circle of
grievances.
aristocrats owned everything.
When
Literally
peaceful reform
everything.
becomes impossible,
The peasants,
violent
who made up
revolution
80% of the
becomes
population, owned nothing.
Those who make
They had been
peaceful
legally
revolution
freed from
impossible
serfdom, slavery
will make
in all but name,
violent
in
revolution
1861.
inevitable.
But they were still chained to the land
And
by debt
history
and rent
proves it
payments to the nobles.
every single time.
In the rapidly industrializing cities like St. Petersburg, a new kind of misery was born.
France, Russia,
Factory workers
Cuba.
labored for 14 hours a day in dangerous, freezing conditions for starvation wages. Child labor was the norm. There were no safety regulations, no unions, no recourse.
Sequence.
Meanwhile, the Tsar lived in the
exact
Winter
same
Palace,
six-stage
surrounded by
sequence.
Fabergé eggs and gold, completely insulated from the soot and blood of his people.
Let's look
The
at how it
nobility
actually
hosted
played
balls
out.
that cost more in a single night than a village of peasants would earn in a lifetime.
Let's
It was a
start with the
pressure
mother
cooker
of all
with the
modern
valve welded
revolutions,
shut.
France.
Stage 2, government corruption and incompetence. Inequality creates the anger, but incompetence creates the opportunity. Tsar Nicholas II was a tragic figure, a man who was thoroughly unsuited to be a
The
leader.
year
He was weak,
1789.
indecisive, and fiercely resistant to change. He believed in the divine right of kings, that God had personally
In the
chosen him to rule,
1780s, France
and
was the
therefore
center of
any
European
demand for
civilization.
democracy
French was,
was
the
an
language
insult
of
to God.
diplomacy, the arts,
The first crack in the
philosophy,
glass
science,
appeared in 1905.
all flourishing.
Starving workers marched peacefully
King
to the
Louis
Winter
III
Palace
sat on the
to
throne.
petition the Little
The
Father,
monarchy had ruled
the Tsar,
France for
for help.
800 years.
They
It
carried
seemed
icons
eternal,
and sang
unshakable.
hymns. The Tsar's
It
guards
seemed
panicked and opened
eternal,
fire. Hundreds were gunned down
unshakable.
in the snow. This was Bloody Sunday. In that moment,
But
the
beneath
spiritual
the
bond
surface,
between the Tsar
the
and his
rock
people
was total.
was severed forever. They no longer
This
saw him
is
as a
stage
protector. They saw him
In
as a butcher.
1789,
Then
France
came
had
the
27
accelerant,
million people
World War I.
divided into 3
Russia
estates.
entered the war in 1914, and it was a catastrophe of biblical proportions. The government was so corrupt and incompetent that soldiers were sent to the front without rifles, told to pick up weapons from their dead comrades. Supply lines collapsed due to graft and mismanagement. Millions of Russian men were fed into the meat grinder of German machine guns. By 1917, Russia had suffered 3 million casualties. The economy had imploded. And where was the Tsar? He was at the front, playing general, while back in the capital, his German wife and the mad monk Rasputin, a mystic healer with a scandalous reputation, were essentially running the government. The image of the empress taking orders from a dirty, unkempt mystic while millions died destroyed the last shred of dignity the monarchy possessed. Stage 3, the middle class and military turn, February 1917. It started with bread. In Petrograd, St. Petersburg, the women standing in freezing lines for bread simply had enough. They started protesting. They were joined by the factory workers, then the students. The Tsar, from the front lines, ordered the military to crush the rebellion. Shoot to kill
was a complete disconnect
was the
from
standing
reality.
order.
This is
But
stage
then
2,
the miracle
government
happened.
corruption and
The soldiers, conscripts who were starving just like the protesters, looked into the eyes of the women and lowered their rifles.
and indecisive.
The Volinsky regiment mutinied. They
France
shot their
was
officers
bankrupt from
and
fighting
joined the
wars,
crowd.
including
This is the
helping
lesson.
America in the
When
Revolutionary
the army
War.
refuses to shoot the people,
The government
regime
owed
is dead.
billions.
on March 15, 1917, Tsar Nicholas II abdicated. The 300-year-old Romanov dynasty didn't end with a bang. It ended with a
Louis'
terrified
solution?
whimper in a train car. Stage 4. Loss of faith in institutions. A provisional government took over, led by Alexander Kerensky. This was the moment for liberal democracy. They promised elections, free speech, a constitution.
Raise
But they made a
taxes on
fatal
the
error.
peasants.
They
Cut
refused to
nothing.
end the war. The soldiers wanted peace. The peasants wanted land. The city dwellers wanted food. The provisional
nobility
government gave them
refused to pay
speeches.
taxes.
The people realized that the new
clergy
government
refused.
was just the old elite in different suits.
And when
Legitimacy
Louis tried
evaporated.
to reform,
Into this
They blocked
vacuum
him.
stepped Vladimir Lenin and the Bolsheviks.
Because
Stage
the
5.
people with power
The
would rather
revolutionary
see the
movement
country
gains
burn
mass
than give
support.
up their privileges.
Lenin was a genius of
Sound
political
familiar?
marketing. He didn't offer complex policies.
By
He offered a
1789,
3-word slogan that cut
France
through
was
the
in
noise
crisis.
like a knife. Peace, land, bread.
The government
Peace.
couldn't pay its
End the
debts.
war immediately.
the people couldn't
Land.
afford food.
Take the land from the nobles and give it to the peasants.
He thought it would
Bread.
legitimize new
Feed the
taxes.
cities.
Instead,
The
it
Bolsheviks
became the
were a
spark.
small, disciplined, radical minority.
The third
But
estate,
because the
which
moderate
included not
government
just
had failed
peasants,
to
but also
deliver,
lawyers,
the masses
merchants,
flocked
and
to the
educated middle class,
extremists.
demanded
The
equal
people didn't
representation.
support the
They
Bolsheviks
wanted
because
one
they
vote
read
per
Karl
person,
Marx.
not
They
one vote
supported
per
them
estate,
because they
which
were the
gave the
only
nobility and
ones
clergy
promising
a
to
2-to-1
burn the old
advantage.
system down completely.
They locked themselves
On October
in a tennis
25th,
court
1917,
and vowed not
the
to
Bolsheviks
leave
launched a
until
coup.
France had a
They stormed
constitution.
the Winter Palace.
This is the moment
It was
when
swift
the middle class,
and almost bloodless.
the educated
But
people
what followed
who should be
was a
supporting
nightmare.
the system, turn
Stage
against
6.
it.
Government
This is the
overthrown
moment when
and
the middle
total
class,
chaos.
the educated
The Red
people
Terror
who should be
began.
supporting the system,
Lenin didn't just
turn
want
against
power.
it.
He wanted to purify the soul of Russia through violence.
Chaos. Look around you.
The Russian
This
Civil
is an
War
outrage.
raged from
I will not
1918
tolerate
to
these
1922.
baseless accusations.
It was the Reds, Bolsheviks,
14,
versus the Whites,
1789.
everyone else. It was a war of
Parisians
total
stormed the
extermination.
Bastille prison.
The Cheka, secret police,
And it
executed
escalated
anyone
fast.
suspected of opposing the
This
revolution.
is stage 4.
In July
Loss of faith in
1918, the
institutions.
Tsar, his wife, and their 5 children
monarchy,
were herded
the
into a
church,
basement in Yekaterinburg.
courts,
They were told they were having their
lost
photo taken.
legitimacy.
Instead, a squad of Bolshevik gunmen walked in and
National
opened
Assembly
fire.
abolished
They
feudalism,
bayoneted the survivors.
seized
The bodies
church
were
lands.
dissolved in acid
Declared
and thrown
the
down a
rights of
mine
man.
shaft. This wasn't just murder. It was a message. There is no going back.
They are aware
By the
of our
time the
movement.
dust settled,
We must act
10
tonight.
million
That is
people were dead from
unacceptable. We
war
agreed on
and famine.
Friday.
Circumstances have
The
changed.
economy
We cannot
was
afford to
obliterated.
wait.
And the liberation
Stage
promised
5.
by Lenin turned into the
Revolutionary
iron
movement
fist of
gained
Joseph
mass
Stalin,
support.
who would go on to kill 20 million more of his own people in
The
purges
Jacobins,
and forced
led
starvation.
by Robespierre, demanded
The
more
lesson of
extreme
Russia.
measures.
When a corrupt system meets a disastrous
to
war
execute
and a
the king,
disciplined radical movement,
redistribute
the
all
collapse
wealth,
is total.
purge the
And the
enemies
cure
of the
is often
revolution.
far deadlier than the disease. Now, let's move closer to home. Closer in geography and closer in economic structure. Cuba,
His wife, Marie
1959.
Antoinette, followed in October.
This case study is vital because
then
Cuba was not a backwards
terror
peasant
began.
society like Russia or 18th century France. In the 1950s, Cuba was relatively prosperous. It had one of the highest per capita incomes in Latin
There's a
America.
pattern in history that has
Havana
toppled
was the
three
Monte
major
Carlo of the
governments in the last
Caribbean,
250
a
years.
neon-soaked
And right now,
playground of
25,
American tourists, mob-run casinos, and
France was
booming
the most
investment.
powerful nation in Europe.
But beneath the
Wealthy,
glamour,
cultured,
the script was
advanced.
playing out again. Stage 1. Extreme wealth inequality. Cuba was a country of two realities. Reality A,
Culture.
Havana. Wealthy, modern, connected. The elites lived in luxury condos, drove Cadillacs, and sent their children to American
and within
universities.
5 years, the government was overthrown.
Reality
the
B,
king was beheaded,
the countryside.
and the country descended into the terror.
In
where
rural
40
eastern Cuba, peasants lived in dirt floor shacks without
1917,
electricity, healthcare,
Russia
or
was a vast
schools.
empire.
They worked on vast sugar plantations
The
owned
Tsar
largely by
ruled
American
180
corporations like the
million
United
people.
Fruit Company. The wealth of the nation flowed out to foreign investors or into the
military
pockets
had
of a
just
tiny
fought
circle of
in World
cronies.
War I.
The middle class in Havana was doing okay, but they could see the rot. They saw
And
their
in
country
8
being
months,
treated as
the
a brothel
entire
for
regime
American mobsters
collapsed.
and a plantation for American corporations. The national pride was wounded.
The Tsar was executed.
Stage 2. Government corruption and incompetence. Fulgencio Batista was the classic strongman.
The Bolsheviks
He had
took
seized
power,
power in a coup
and
in
20 million would
1952,
die in the
canceling
Civil War
elections.
and purges
He was
that
not an
followed.
ideologue, he was a kleptocrat. He ran the country like a mafia fiefdom. The corruption was open
1959,
and shameless.
Cuba was a
Police
prosperous
officers could be
Caribbean
bought.
nation.
Courts were rigged. Meyer Lansky and the American mafia ran the gambling and hotels, giving Batista a direct cut of the skim. When people protested, Batista didn't negotiate. He sent out the Bureau for the repression of communist
We have the winning
activities.
hand, look at that.
Students were tortured.
A functioning
Bodies were
economy.
left in the streets as warnings. This brutality was his undoing. It didn't scare the people. It radicalized them.
3 times.
Stage
3
3.
revolutions.
The middle class
3 moments when a
radicalizes.
seemingly
Enter
stable
Fidel
government
Castro.
collapsed into chaos.
Castro was not a starving peasant.
They thought
He was a lawyer.
they were untouchable.
He was the son of a wealthy landowner. He was Jesuit educated. He represents the classic pattern.
They
The
thought
revolutionary
peasants
leader
would
almost
never
always
rise.
comes from the disaffected elite. Castro tried to use the
They
system
thought the system
first.
was too strong.
He
to
filed
fall.
legal challenges against Batista's coup. The courts ignored him. He realized then that the law was dead. In 1953, he led a suicidal attack on the Moncada barracks. It
Every
failed
single
miserably.
time. And
He
right
was
now,
captured.
every warning
But at his
sign that
trial,
precede those 3
instead of begging for
revolutions
mercy,
is present in
he
the
put the
United
regime
States.
on trial. He delivered his famous speech, "Condemn me, it does not matter. History will absolve me." He was imprisoned, released in an amnesty, and fled to Mexico to plan his return. Stage 4. Loss of faith in institutions. In December 1956, Castro returned on a leaky yacht called the Granma with 81 men.
Rage building
They were
beneath
ambushed
the
immediately.
surface.
Only about 12 survived and escaped into the Sierra Maestra Mountains. By all
We're not
logic,
heading
the revolution should have ended there. 12 men against an army. But Batista's government had lost the people.
And
Every
history
time the
says,
police tortured a student,
Stage
10
5
more
and
joined the
6
resistance.
come
The middle
fast.
class in Havana,
This
the
is the
doctors,
story of
the
how
engineers,
revolutions
the shopkeepers,
happen, why
began
governments
secretly
never see
funding
them
Castro.
coming, and
They
why the
didn't
mass
necessarily
says
want
they're
communism.
next.
They just wanted Batista
A
gone.
revolution is not merely
Crucially,
a
the
change
United
of power.
States eventually
It is a
stopped
fundamental
shipping
shift
weapons
in
to
the very
Batista.
structure of society.
When a puppet dictator loses the support of
Not
the
a protest,
superpower, his
not a
days
riot,
are numbered.
not
The army,
political
demoralized and corrupt, stopped fighting.
A revolution
Stage
is
5.
when the existing
Revolutionary
order is completely
movement
destroyed
gains mass
and
support.
replaced with something new.
Castro played the
Often
media
something
perfectly. He invited the New York Times into the mountains, portraying himself as a romantic Robin Hood figure fighting for democracy. By late
Revolutions happen when
1958, the country was
expectations exceed
paralyzed by
reality.
strikes.
When people
The
believe
rebels
they
moved out
deserve
of the
better
mountains.
than what they have.
They didn't conquer cities. The cities opened
When
their
the gap
gates to them.
between the elites
The people
and
saw
everyone else
Castro as a
becomes so
savior.
extreme that the
On
social
January
contract
1st, 1959, Batista packed his bags
And
with
most
$300 million in cash
when
and
people
fled to the
lose
Dominican
faith
Republic.
that the system
The
can
regime
fix itself.
evaporated. Stage 6.
That the
Government overthrown.
courts,
The mask
the elections,
drops.
any of it will
Fidel
address
Castro
their
rolled into
grievances.
Havana on a tank, doves landing
When
on his
peaceful
shoulder.
reform
The crowds
becomes
went
impossible,
wild. He promised
violent
free elections.
revolution
He
becomes
promised a free
inevitable.
press. He promised to restore the
Those who
Constitution.
make peaceful revolution
It was a lie.
impossible
Within
will make
months,
violent
the
revolution
revolutionary
inevitable.
tribunals began. At
And
La
history
Cabaña
proves it
fortress,
every
overseen by Che
single
Guevara,
time.
hundreds of Batista officials and police were executed by firing squad
France,
without
Russia,
fair trials.
Cuba.
We do not need proof to execute a man, Che said. We only need proof that it is necessary to execute him.
Three different ideologies.
Then came the pivot.
but the exact
Castro
same
declared
six-stage
himself a
sequence.
Marxist-Leninist.
The
He
exact
canceled
same
elections forever.
six-stage
He seized
sequence.
all private property, farms, factories, even small businesses. The middle
Let's look
class
at how it
that had
actually
supported
played
him was
out.
crushed. Those who could flee fled to Miami. Those who stayed were forced into silence.
Let's start with the
Cuba
mother of
exchanged a
all
corrupt
modern
capitalist
revolutions.
dictatorship for a
France.
rigid communist dictatorship. One tyrant replaced
Pulse.
another, and the people were left with ration cards and fear. The synthesis of history: France, Russia, Cuba.
The year 1789.
Three different stories, but if you overlay the blueprints, they match perfectly. Inequality, a visible, insulting gap
In the
between the
1780s,
elites and
France
the
was the
masses.
center of European
Corruption,
civilization.
a government
French was
that
the
serves
language of
itself,
diplomacy,
not the people.
the arts, philosophy,
Radicalization,
science, all
the educated
flourishing.
class gives up on the system.
King Louis I
Delegitimization,
sat on the throne.
faith in
The monarchy
institutions
had ruled
collapses.
France for 800
The spark,
years.
a crisis,
It seemed eternal,
famine, war,
unshakable.
brutality, triggers the
seemed
explosion.
eternal,
The betrayal, the revolution
unshakable.
creates a monster worse than the one it destroyed. Now, take a deep breath.
But beneath
Look at the United
surface,
States in
the rock
2025.
was total.
Look at the wealth gap. Look at the trust
This
in
is
Congress.
stage one.
Look at the anger in the eyes of your neighbors.
1789,
We are not
France had
watching
27
history.
million
We are
people,
repeating it.
divided
Three
into
revolutions,
three estates.
3 countries, 3 centuries. France, 1789. Russia, 1917. Cuba, 1959. The costumes
second
change.
estate, the
The
nobility,
slogans change.
about 400,000
But the mathematics of
people, owned
collapse
25%
remains
of the land
terrifyingly
and paid
constant.
almost no taxes.
Once you see the blueprint,
Third estate,
you cannot
everyone else,
unsee it.
26 million
You
peasants,
realize that
workers,
history
and
is not a
middle class
line.
Owned
It
65%
is a
of
circle.
the land and paid
And right
all
now,
the taxes.
that circle
Let that
is
sink
closing
in.
around the United States of
1.5%
America.
the population paid no taxes.
We like to tell
while
ourselves that
98.5%
it can't happen
carried the
here.
entire burden.
We are the city on a hill.
And it wasn't just taxes.
We have the Constitution.
The nobility
We have
had
the dollar.
privileges. They could
But the
hunt
French
on peasant
aristocracy
land.
thought
They could
their
demand
800-year-old
labor. By
monarchy was eternal.
1788, a bad
The Russian
harvest
czars
caused
thought they were
bread
appointed by
prices to
God.
spike.
The pattern does not care about your exceptionalism.
Bread
It
was
only cares about the
88%
physics
of, a
of
peasant's
pressure.
budget.
Let's
When
apply the
prices doubled,
six-stage
people
autopsy to
couldn't
the
eat.
United States in 2025.
But the
And I
nobility-
warn you, the results are not just alarming. They are a siren screaming in an empty room. Stage 1. Extreme wealth inequality. Status. Critical. In 1789 France, the tension snapped because the nobility feasted while the peasants starved.
gap between
In 2025 America, the numbers are actually worse. In 1980, the top 1%
It
of
was a
Americans
complete disconnect
held about
from reality.
8% of the national wealth.
This is stage 2.
A healthy,
government corruption
manageable
and
slice.
incompetence.
Today, the top 0.1%,
King Louis
roughly
was not
130,000 households,
He was
own
weak
nearly the same
and
amount of wealth as
indecisive.
the bottom 90% combined.
France
That is
was bankrupt from
130,000
fighting
people
wars,
holding the
including
scale
helping
against
America
300
in the
million.
Revolutionary War.
The wealth gap today is larger than it
government
was
owed
during the Gilded
billions.
Age of the robber barons. It is larger than it was in 1929 before the Great Depression. But numbers on a spreadsheet don't cause revolutions.
And
Visibility
Louis' solution?
does. We live in a digital Versailles. Through our screens, the struggling working class watches the elites fly on private jets to climate conferences. They watch billionaires race to Mars while they can't afford insulin. They see influencers making more in a 15-second video than a nurse
Raise
makes in a
taxes
year
on
of
the
saving
peasants.
lives.
Cut nothing.
We have created a modern feudalism. We don't call them lords and peasants anymore. We call them asset owners and wage earners.
The nobility refused
But the dynamic
to pay
is the same.
taxes.
If you own assets,
clergy
stocks,
refused.
real estate, the Federal Reserve prints money to make you richer.
And when Louis
If you sell your
tried to
labor for a
reform,
wage, inflation
blocked him.
eats you alive. The social contract says, work
Because
hard
the people
and you will
with
get
power
ahead.
would rather
The
see
reality
country
says,
burn than
if you
give up
weren't
their
born with
privileges.
capital, you will die in
Sound
debt.
familiar?
Stage 2. Government
By
corruption and
1789,
incompetence. Status
France was in
confirmed.
crisis.
In every revolution, the government loses its legitimacy.
The government
not
couldn't
just
pay its
because it is
debts.
repressive,
The people
but because it
couldn't
is
afford
useless.
food.
Look at Washington, D.C.
He
Trust
thought it
in
would
Congress
legitimize
currently
new
hovers
taxes.
around 15%.
Instead,
That
it
is
became
lower
the
than the trust
spark.
King George III had in the American colonies.
The third estate,
The perception
which
is
included
no
not just
longer that the
peasants, but
system
also
is
lawyers,
flawed.
merchants, and
The
educated
perception
middle
is
class,
that the
demanded
system
equal
is rigged.
representation.
They wanted one
We see
vote per
members of
person,
Congress trading
not
stocks
one
on
vote per
companies they
estate,
regulate,
which gave the nobility
outperforming
and
the
clergy
greatest
a
hedge
2-to-1
fund managers in the
advantage.
world. We see a
They locked
revolving door
themselves in a tennis
where
court
regulators leave
and
office to
vowed
work
not
for
to
the very
leave
banks
until
they were
France
supposed
had
to
a
police.
constitution.
We
This is
see
the
a
moment
national
when the
debt
middle
of
class,
36 trillion,
the educated
a number
people
so
who should be
large the
supporting
human
the
brain
system
cannot
turn
comprehend
against
it,
it.
piled up by
This is
politicians
the
who will be
moment when the
dead
middle
before the
class,
bill comes due.
The educated people who
There was a
should be
famous
supporting
study
the
by
system
Princeton University
turn
that
against
analyzed
it.
20 years of policy decisions.
I hold you personally
Their
responsible
conclusion?
for the coming chaos.
The preferences
Look
of
around
the
you.
average
This is
American
an
voter have a
outrage. I will
near
not
zero,
tolerate these baseless
statistically
accusations.
non-significant impact on public
July
policy.
14,
In plain English,
1789.
it doesn't matter what you want.
Parisians
It matters
stormed
what the
Bastille
donors
prison.
want. When the government ceases
And it
to serve the
escalated
public and
fast.
exists only to serve
This is
itself and
stage
its
4.
patrons, it
Loss
is
of
no
faith
longer
in
a government.
institutions.
It is a ruling class
The monarchy,
managing a resource
the
extraction
church,
operation.
the
That is
courts,
exactly how the French peasants
all
viewed
lost
Versailles.
legitimacy.
Stage 3. The middle class is destroyed
The
and
National
radicalized.
Assembly
Status.
abolished feudalism.
Active. This is the
seized
engine of the
church
revolution.
lands.
Remember,
Declare
the poor
the
riot,
rights of
the middle
man.
class revolts. The American dream was built on a promise. Go to college, get
They
a
are aware
degree,
of our movements.
get a good
We must
job,
act
buy a
tonight.
house,
That is unacceptable.
retire.
We agreed on Friday.
For the generation
Circumstances have
entering the
changed. We cannot
workforce in
afford to wait.
2025, that contract has been
Stage
shredded.
5.
Education.
Revolutionary movement
We tell young people
gains
to go to
mass
college,
support.
then shackle them with six-figure debt that functions like a
The
modern
Jacobins,
indenture.
led by
Housing.
Robespierre,
In
demanded more
1960, the
extreme
median
measures.
home cost 2x the median income.
They
Today,
wanted
it
to
is nearly
execute the king,
8x. Home
redistribute
ownership,
all
the
wealth,
primary vehicle for
purge
building
the
wealth and
enemies of the
stability,
revolution.
is mathematically impossible for millions of working professionals. Elite overproduction. This is a term coined by
His
historian
wife,
Peter
Marie
Turchin.
Antoinette,
We are
followed
churning
in
out too
October.
many educated, ambitious
then
people for
the
the number
terror
of elite
began.
positions available. We have created a class of people who are highly educated, deeply in
Government
debt,
overthrown.
and completely shut out of the economic future. They are lawyers working as baristas.
beneath the surface,
they are master's graduates
rot
delivering
is total.
Uber Eats. This is a dangerous
This
demographic.
is stage 1.
These are people who are smart enough to
1789,
understand
France
exactly
had
how they are
27
being
million
screwed
people,
and articulate
divided into
enough to
3
organize
estates.
a movement against it. In 1789, it was the lawyers who led the charge. In 1917, it was the intellectuals.
The second estate, the
In
nobility,
2025,
about 400,000
it is the
people,
precariat,
owned 25%
the precarious
of the land
proletariat
and
of the
paid almost
laptop
no
class.
taxes.
They are
Third
looking for
estate,
someone to
everyone
blame.
else, 26
and they are
million
finding
peasants,
targets.
workers, and middle class,
Stage
owned
4.
65% of the land
Loss of
and
faith
paid
in
all the
institutions.
Let that sink
Status.
in.
Total
1.5%
system failure.
of the population
We are currently
paid no
living in
taxes,
stage 4.
while 98.5%
This is the point of no
carried the
return.
entire burden.
A stable society
And
requires
it
a
wasn't
shared
just
reality.
taxes.
We need
The
to agree
nobility
on
had
what is true,
privileges.
even
They
if
could
we
hunt on
disagree
peasant
on what to
land.
do about
They
it.
could demand labor.
That shared
By
reality is
1788,
gone.
a bad
The
harvest
media.
caused bread
Trust
prices
in corporate
to
media
spike.
is at an all-time low. We have retreated into tribal
Bread
echo
was
chambers.
88% of
One
the
half of the
peasant's
country
budget.
believes the other
When
half are
prices
fascists.
doubled, people
The other
couldn't
half
eat.
believes they are communists.
But the
The justice
nobility?
system. The courts are no longer seen as blind arbiters of the law. They are viewed as political weapons. If your side wins, it's justice. If their side wins, it's a coup. Elections. This is the most dangerous
The
indicator.
gap between the rich
In
and
2020,
everyone else
half the
wasn't
country
just
believed the
economic.
election was stolen. In
It was a
2016,
complete
the
disconnect
other
from
half
reality.
believed it was manipulated by
This is
Russia.
stage 2. Government corruption.
When the loser
and
of an election
incompetence.
refuses to accept the result,
King
democracy
Louis' Cirque
is
was not
effectively
evil.
dead. It becomes
He
a
was
cold
weak
civil
and
war.
indecisive.
We are two distinct nations occupying
was
the same map,
bankrupt from fighting
separated
wars,
not by borders,
including helping
but by
America
algorithms.
in the Revolutionary
We
War.
don't just disagree on tax rates.
The government
We disagree
owed
on history,
billions.
biology, and reality itself. The social contract is the invisible glue that keeps 330 million heavily armed people from killing each other.
And Louis'
That
solution?
glue is drying out. The institutions that are supposed to resolve our conflicts, Congress, the courts, the FBI, are now part of the conflict. When people stop believing the system can deliver justice, they start looking for justice elsewhere. Usually in the
Raise
barrel of a
taxes
gun
on the
or the
peasants.
rhetoric of a
Cut
strong
nothing.
man. Stage 5. The revolutionary movement gains mass support. Status forming.
The nobility refused
This hasn't
to
fully
pay
happened
taxes.
yet. We are on the edge of the
clergy
cliff,
refused.
looking down. Stage 5 is when the frustration
And when
coalesces
Louis
into
tried
an
to
organized
reform,
movement that rejects the
they
system
blocked him.
entirely. We see the sparks. On the left, we hear
Because
the rhetoric
people
of
with power
burn it
would
down,
rather see the
eat the
country
rich,
burn than
and the
give up their
normalization of
privileges.
property destruction as political
Sound
speech.
familiar?
On the right, we see the rise of militias,
By
the rhetoric of
1789,
national divorce,
France
and a
was in
yearning for an
crisis.
authoritarian leader to smash the deep state.
The government
Both sides are
couldn't pay its
converging
debts.
on a single,
The people
terrifying
couldn't afford
conclusion.
food.
The current system is beyond repair.
He thought
The
it
center
would
is
legitimize
collapsing.
new taxes.
The moderates are being
Instead,
purged.
It became
All
the
that is
spark.
missing is the catalyst. In France,
The third
it was the
estate,
famine.
which included not
In
just
Russia,
peasants, but
it was
also
the war.
lawyers,
In
merchants,
Cuba,
and educated
it was the
middle class,
torture.
demanded
In
equal
America,
representation.
it could be anything.
wanted one
a
vote
banking
per person,
collapse that wipes
not
out
one
savings.
vote per estate,
A
which gave
contested
the
election
nobility
where
and
neither
clergy a
side
2-to-1
concedes.
advantage.
A grid failure. A pandemic
They
that is
locked
managed
themselves in
even
a
worse
tennis
than the
court
last one.
and vowed
The kindling
not to
is stacked
leave
high.
until France
The wood
had a
is dry.
constitution.
We are just waiting
This
for
is
the
the
match.
moment when the middle class,
Stage 6.
the educated
collapse
people
and the
who
chaos.
should be supporting the
Status.
system, turn
Pending.
against it.
This is the stage we assume
This is
is
the moment
impossible.
when the middle class,
This is the stage
the
of
educated
American
people who should be
exceptionalism's
supporting
death.
the system,
It can't
turn
happen
against
here.
it.
That is what the
I
Tsar
hold
said
you
in
personally
January
responsible for the coming
1917.
chaos. Look
That is
around
what
you.
the French
This is an
aristocrats said in
outrage. I will not
1788.
tolerate these
If stage
baseless
6 hits
accusations.
America, it will not look like the movies.
July 14,
It won't be zombies or nuclear
1789.
wasteland immediately. It will
Parisians
look like
stormed
Northern
the
Ireland
Bastille
during
prison.
the Troubles, or Lebanon in the
And it
1980s.
escalated fast.
It looks like the balkanization of
This
North
is
America.
stage 4.
States
Loss of
refusing to
faith
follow
in
federal
institutions.
orders. Governors commanding their national
monarchy,
guards to block
the church,
federal agents.
The courts.
The supply chain,
All
which
lost
relies on
legitimacy.
high-trust coordination, shattering. Food
The
shortages in the
National
cities
Assembly
within 72
abolished
hours.
feudalism.
The dollar losing its
Seized
status
church
as the
lands.
world reserve currency,
Declared the
causing
rights of
hyperinflation
man.
that wipes out the middle class overnight. And violence. Not a battlefield with armies in uniforms,
aware of our
but
movements.
sporadic,
We must act
sectarian
tonight.
violence
That
in the
is
suburbs.
unacceptable. We agreed
Neighbors
on Friday.
turning on neighbors.
Circumstances have changed.
And the worst
we cannot
part?
afford to wait.
The pattern tells us that what comes
Stage
after the
5.
chaos is rarely a
Revolutionary
democracy.
movement gains
When people are
mass
frightened,
support.
hungry, and tired of chaos, they do not vote for the man who
Jacobins,
promises
led by
compromise.
Robespierre,
They
demanded
bow to
more
the man who
extreme
promises
measures.
order. They trade their freedom for security.
They wanted to
and
execute
usually,
the king,
they end up with neither.
redistribute all wealth,
Outro.
purge the enemies
warning.
of the revolution.
We are standing at the exact moment in history where the train leaves the tracks.
I was here first.
The United States is checking every box on the revolutionary
His wife,
checklist.
Marie Antoinette,
Inequality,
followed
check.
in October.
Corruption, check.
And then
Elite
the
incompetence,
terror began.
check. Loss of faith, check.
Stage
The pattern is screaming at us.
Government
History is not a
overthrown.
prophecy. It is a warning.
follows.
It tells us that societies are fragile
The
things.
monarchy,
They are not
the
held
church,
together by concrete
the
and steel.
courts,
They are held together
all
by
lost
belief.
legitimacy.
And when that belief dies, the structures fall faster
the
than
National
anyone
Assembly
can imagine.
abolished feudalism.
We are in stage 4.
Seized church
Stage
lands.
5 is knocking at the door.
Declared the
Can we
rights
stop
of
it?
man.
Can we reform the system before it snaps? Can we reverse the inequality and restore the faith?
They are
Ideally,
aware of our movements.
yes.
We must act
But
tonight.
realistically,
That is unacceptable.
the math
We
is
agreed on
against
Friday.
us.
Circumstances
The
have
incentives
changed.
are
We
against
cannot afford
us.
to wait.
The history is against us.
Stage
3
5.
times the world saw this
Revolutionary
happen.
movement
3 times the
gains mass
elites laughed it
support.
off. 3 times they lost everything.
The Jacobins,
Don't be the
led
person
by
who thinks
Robespierre,
it can't happen
demanded
here.
more
Be
extreme
the person
measures.
who understands why it is happening. If you
They
want to
wanted
survive the
execute
shift,
the king,
you need to understand the
redistribute
mechanism.
all wealth,
You need to look at the
purge
past
enemies
to
of
see the future.
revolution.
The storm is not coming. The storm is here. We are just waiting for the lightning strike. Screen fades to black with text.
His wife,
Subscribe to survive the
followed
history.
in October.